About 3/4 of the population of the Green Hill School, which is the juvenile detention center for boys out in Chehalis, about 3/4 of them are actually adults between the ages of 18 and 25, all thanks to Democrat legislation that is failing absolutely every single person who is involved. We cover the juvenile crime crisis on this show a lot because it's important. Because you've got kids who are going down the wrong path who don't need to go down that wrong path. But if they go down that wrong path, they get to the point where they actually get put into juvenile detention. We need to be focused on making sure that they course correct. Because we're not going to keep a kid who's 15, 16 years old in jail forever. We know that they're going to come out, and it is better for all of us. It's better for society if when they get out, they don't recommit another crime. Now, the numbers as of August 31st, it's 207 juvenile inmates at this facility, Green Hill School. The majority of them, at 152, are 18 to 25 years old. The majority of all the kids who are there, and adults, 37% of them committed felony robbery. 19% committed either a murder or were convicted of manslaughter. 18% for assault, 11% burglary, and 6% of either rape or rape of a child. Now, the 18 and 25-year-olds, and maybe even some of the 16, 17-year-olds, these are hardened criminals. And many of them tend to come with some gang connections. And even though the 18 to 25-year-old inmates committed very serious offenses, many of whom will eventually go into adult prison once they turn 25, the state, because of Democrat law, decides to house them with vulnerable teens, sometimes 13, 14, 15 years old, who have a shot at some level of course correction but end up getting stymied because of the influence of these older, hardened criminals. Now, Democrats allowed juvenile detention facilities to house criminals up to the age of 25 with a bill that was passed back in 2018. Now, prior to this law, if you were a juvenile convicted in an adult court of a very serious crime, well, you would then go to an adult facility once you turn 18. Because that's when you become an adult in the eyes of the law. But the bill that they passed changed that. And it said that anyone who is a juvenile offender, you get to stay in juvenile detention facilities until you reach the age of 25, so long as you were under the age of 18 when you committed the crime. Now, violent crimes that used to be the jurisdiction of adult courts just by default because of how serious they are, that switched. That switched. If the suspect is 16 or 17 years old, it was then mandated to go into juvenile court. What kind of crimes? Robbery 1, drive-by shooting, and violent offenses that involve a firearm. You would think that that would then take you into adult court, but not in Washington State, because this is Washington State. Now, folks who are critics of this law, as I am, we point out that this creates some pretty significant safety concerns. The people who support the bill say, oh, but it brings more age-appropriate rehab programs while these individual brains are still developing because, you know, at 24 years old, you don't really know that a drive-by shooting is wrong. At 16, 17, you know, the idea of a drive-by shooting sounds fun because you play a lot of Grand Theft Auto. That's what we're supposed to believe. Now, when I say that there are safety concerns, know that just in August alone at the Green Hill School, there were 85 reported acts of aggression. That includes assault, fights, threats of violence, and what they just deem serious resident disturbances. On top of that, there were 64 drug-related incidents. I wonder how that's happening. It's a juvenile detention facility. How are the drugs getting in? Now, as much as the Democrats want to tell you that, well, I intended to keep these younger offenders there because it would focus on their rehab, and that, of course, is going to get them on the right path. Okay, great. Why don't you do that in adult jail? I mean, you do understand, folks, that juveniles who go into adult jail and adults who go into adult jail, most of them are going to get out at some point. Not all of them. Some of them will stay there longer than others, but they're going to get out. So why would you not offer rehab in the adult prisons as well? Why just for the teens? Aren't we all better off if we offer rehab in prisons, regardless of the age of the people or the gender of the people? Doesn't that make more sense? Isn't that better for society? And it's funny because I was looking at this legislation from 2018, and it said that protections were necessary and mandated to put into place with this law, quote, to reduce potential risks of victimization and negative influences. Meaning my concerns, which even they at the time thought were valid, specifically told to the state, you need to make sure that you are at least protecting the younger kids from the 18 to 25-year-olds. You think that's happening? Because between, 2020 and 2024, my God, have there been how many controversies now with Green Hill School? I mean, there's too many to count, right? You've got the instances in which not only are the inmates getting into trouble because of fights, trying to break out, trying to hurt staff members, in some cases succeeding, taking drugs. Drugs are rampant at Green Hill School. But just last week, and I haven't seen this reported anywhere, just last week, there was a fight amongst 19 of the inmates after, according to a memo that I got a hold of, quote, a group of young people ran across the campus and engaged in a physical altercation with another group. Employees were assaulted during this. Now, that facility has been dealing with an increased spotlight because of whatever the specialty drug unit is in Chehalis. They had been sounding the alarms for, 2 years now, saying, y'all have a big problem of drugs and guns or weapons being funneled into this school somehow, and every time something happens, you guys aren't even calling 911 to report this, so you're making our jobs even more difficult. You had instances in which staff members allegedly were not just caught bringing in whatever the contraband is that they happened to be bringing in at the time, but one had allegedly had a sexual relationship with a former inmate. Not allowed to do that. I know sometimes love blossoms in unexpected ways and places, but that's a no.
Star-crossed lovers.
Yeah, she was there and free and happy but lonely, and he was there, 15 years old. And I mean, come on. Although I think in that case, at least it was an adult. I remember saying to myself, okay, this is pretty bad, but at least it's not the worst that it could potentially be. And how sad is it that we have to now lean into that? Like, it could have been worse. It is a bad idea all around. It is very clearly not working based upon all the fights that break out and the high recidivism rate. And no one wants to acknowledge that other than Republicans. I know Senator John Braun, the minority leader, he's been focused on this. We've talked about this with him before. Republicans are trying to push back, but they don't have the power. And unless you give them that kind of power, we're never going to take the state back, and we're not going to ever truly address this clear juvenile crime crisis. Just continue to keep our heads in the sand. That's what Democrats hope we continue to do.